Yeah. You're listening to Autodesk's Digital Builder Podcast, a show that inspires construction professionals to innovate and use technology to improve how they build our world. I'm Eric Thomas, and I've been working in construction for nearly a decade. And now I have the privilege to sit down with industry trailblazers to hear how they're solving construction's biggest challenges and redefining the future of the built environment. All right, welcome to another episode of Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. We are coming to you live from Autodesk University. It is the first of 3 days right now, our first interview for the week, actually. So I'm excited. I hope you are as well. I'm sitting down today with Tonya Custis, the Director of AI Research with Autodesk. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what the heck AI is, what ML is, artificial intelligence, machine learning, what those impacts are, and really leaning in on the concept of why those tools are not scary and they're actually going to be our friend moving forward. So I'm very grateful for Tonya to join me today and dispel some of those rumors. Tonya, how are you doing today? We're back at you. It's great.
Doing great. Yeah, it's great to be here. There's so many people here. It's exciting to be back in Vegas.
Yeah, there's I'd say thousands of people staring at us right now. So no big deal or any pressure right now. I'm really excited to build on what we did last year at Autodesk University in New Orleans. And so we're going to have a super fun conversation and we're going to get into the thick of it. So can you tell me a little bit more? What does your team do at Autodesk? Because it's incredibly interesting. And I'd really love if you could kind of give an overview of your role as AI research lead.
So my team does fundamental and applied AI research. So we extend and advance the state of the art in AI and machine learning, and in areas that can be applied to Autodesk products. Doing computer science research doesn't look that interesting. We're not it's not like a chemistry lab with lab coats or anything. But it's a lot of people in front of computers running experiments, and we do a lot of research on deep learning and generative AI for 3D, 2D, and CAD geometry.
You've got a robust amount that you're covering. Your team's doing some really cool stuff, which is great. And I think it gives us a fantastic foundation for the rest of our conversation to kind of do away with those myths that we were talking about. But the media cycle is a buzz right now about the impact of artificial intelligence. And I think that's been growing for months. And I was hoping you could give me some context. Why is this explosion of AI media happening, and what do these tools do?
Right. So why now? I've been doing this for the last 15 years, and let me tell you, no one has ever been interested in what I do until now. My parents have not understood what I've done until now.
I deal with that all the time.
So, this isn't new, okay? The math isn't new. AI is not new. It's more that we've reached this kind of tipping point where data is in the cloud. It's in a place where we can run compute on it. And so the co-location of data and compute is super important to why we're seeing this now. But then also the size, which leads to the size of the models. And they have become useful to people. They become almost human-like. So they've become interesting. Like previously, they were not so interesting.
Yeah.
They've come to a point where they can help people save time. And so, 10 years ago, I worked at a place where we were generating summaries of legal briefs and legal cases. The editors took more time to fix the garbage the computer generated than it took them to just write things.
Yeah.
But now we're at that tipping point where you can generate something and the editor can save time by just editing that thing that the computer generated. So that's why now.
It's such a great inflection point too. And I'm hearing more folks talk about AI and our data and managing their data in a really robust way that I wasn't hearing 2, 3, 4 years ago. And I think the light bulb is starting to turn on. People are starting to understand, as you just alluded to, this is going to save me time. This is going to make a big impact on the work that I do in my business. And so there's just a lot happening right now. And I'm excited. I'm glad that you're excited and your team's doing so much fantastic work. But could you dive into that ambiguity gap a little bit for me right now? So I think a lot of the challenge that we deal with is folks don't necessarily understand what these different tools and technologies do. And that is the catalyst for the anxiety that folks are feeling. And so I'd love it if you could, lift the curtain a little bit and give a high-level overview of, what artificial intelligence is, what machine learning is, and, what large language models are, because I think that buzzword is starting to show up more often now, too.
Definitely is. So generally, we will define artificial intelligence, AI, as capabilities that are being done by a computer that are typically thought of as being done by a human. Okay, so tasks that a human usually does, they're being done by a computer. So that's a pretty wide definition. Machine learning is a subset of AI. So not all AI is machine learning, but machine learning is all AI.
The layered nuance is exciting.
And machine learning is when the computer learns from data. So it's learning patterns and probabilities and other information from the data itself, like classification things, recommendation algorithms. A lot of things you see every day are just simple, machine learning. Large language models are models built with machine learning, and they are built on huge amounts of data. And what they are trained to do, the training objective of large language models, is to predict the next word, which sounds so boring. However, when you can do that and you can do it at scale, you also get a ton of other tasks for free. You get things like question answering, summarization, even answering like math problems. So, there's that scale is something that I think surprised all of us because we had never trained at that scale before. We can use it for almost anything that we use traditional machine learning for, like classification and things like that. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting place to be. But again, they're not perfect. They don't do everything, and they literally only predict the next word. They also sound very confident. So psychologically, you would really like to believe them, but they literally know nothing. They know no facts. What they are exceedingly good at, large language models, is syntax, linguistic syntax. So like structure of language.
And there's so much there, especially with the way that it can learn from data. And when I talk to construction folks on the regular, I really lean in on data standards and being really intent with the way they capture the data, because that impacts everything you're talking about so heavily as you start building on that. It's the garbage in, garbage out, acronym where everybody goes, okay, well, you put everything in at random, and you're going to get random back out if you're not, being very deliberate about how you set that up. And so I think it really is an exciting moment for our industry, because we're starting to step back and say, okay, where does this get to augment what we're doing? Where can it make improvements? And I think that's where I really like to emphasize with folks that this isn't the scary Skynet that's coming at you right now. We're at this opportunity where you say, okay, a computer can do something at scale that I can't do as a person, or can do it much more quickly. And now I get to go home at 5 instead of 7, or I get to go do something else. And,
100%.
That feels a lot better than this weird big brothery vibe of somebody watching everything you're doing. Like, that's not the value, and that's not what people are doing.
No, and honestly, computers really are quite stupid, or I would not have a job. So, they don't learn what you don't teach them, number one. And a lot of the Skynet, Terminator scenarios.
Thanks, movies.
Yeah, are from movies. And it's also a little bit of like psychological projection, right? So whenever someone is afraid of like AI doing bad stuff, I'm like, well, what bad stuff are you going to do? No tech is neutral. And it's the people behind it that, do bad stuff, right? So like databases, you could use those for a lot of bad things. But again, it's not the database's fault, but we tend to anthropomorphize AI and sort of like treat it like it's a person a little bit. And so there is a weird psychological aspect to it as well. But honestly, like AI is very not scary.
Yeah. And I feel like everything you're sharing right now, there's a bit of a confirmation bias in there too, where you go, oh, the bad thing happened and we noticed. But how many times was the technology leveraged perfectly where nothing happened and it was just the most boring thing ever, but you got to go home at 5:30?
Right. And if it's intuitive, if it makes sense to you, you don't notice it, right?
Yeah.
Like every predictive texting suggestion you get, 99 out of 100 are great. And then you get one that's really weird. And then you like laugh at how bad the algorithm is. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you're happy with your Google Home Mini until it's, doing the wrong thing, and then you're yelling at it, or at least I am in my house.
Exactly.
Don't tell anybody about that one. But I'd like to move a little bit on into generative AI, because that's another topic that comes up fairly regularly. So can you tell me what the heck is generative AI, and what role does it have within the construction industry?
Just with AI generally, in the past, traditional AI, we've been encoding things. So we've been taking a lot of information and kind of compressing it down and encoding it. Now what we're doing is we're taking those encodings and decoding them. And in so doing, it generates things. Okay. So it's sort of just like the logical next step of figuring out how to do stuff with AI. Generative AI is when you put in a prompt, and that prompt could be, a word, it could be a phrase, it could be part of a drawing, it could be, an image, whatever, right? And then the output of the algorithm actually generates the output for you. So it's not like search where it's just finding the output. It's actually, generating. So we see it a lot with language models, like we were talking about. So ChatGPT, right, can, you give it a question, it generates an answer. You give it a couple articles and it will generate a summary for you. That's what we're seeing. And I think we'll see it more and more because generating things saves people time. We can take pictures of a construction site and generate possible code violations. Here's a drawing and it can generate, try these materials, right? So there's anything where you kind of, generate anything.
The namesake makes sense when you start digging a little bit in, but anybody in construction now, it makes so much sense to think about these tools in their application, because the labor shortages are not going away, and
Absolutely.
Anything that we can do to improve how our teams are able to go to work and do things at scale with less time and increasingly less resources available is a huge win. And so I'm really excited to start seeing, all these shifts and all the buzz, but we have to obviously parse what's real and what isn't as we kind of get into it. But I'd like to take a look at some of the exciting announcements that came out today during our keynote. So I know Andrew shared some exciting things. Can you share your reaction to some of these developments and the impacts that they're going to bring to Autodesk customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the takeaways, at least from my standpoint today, were one, we have been doing AI.
Yeah, this isn't new.
So it's not new. But, looking more at how do we leverage and sort of sew that AI together into an open platform. That approach is so important because data is so important. And you can't do AI without data, but also capturing the workflow and how the data moves through the workflow is also just such an important part of AI, because you're predicting things. So you want to be able to predict what's next, and you can't predict what's next if you don't know what the next thing that's going to happen is, like in the design workflow, for example. The importance of context also. So like what Amy was talking about with importing different contexts and contextual information. Again, that is so important to, the more data you give the computer, the more it, I'm not going to say understands, but the better it can predict. And thinking about how we use AI at different levels, right? So we can use AI for analysis, right? So that's, I have a lot of data, I aggregated it, and I learned these really interesting things, right? Like that is great. And, but beyond that, we can automate things, right? So boring things that designers don't want to do or that take them a lot of time. And then beyond that, like you were talking about before, augmentation. So like that's the ultimate goal, right? Like we want to make the computer better, but we also want to make the human better, right? So like peanut butter and chocolate, right? All of those things sort of build on each other. And I think, Andrew did a good job of sort of setting it up that way.
And we don't want to take the humanity out of what we're doing as well. Like,
absolutely.
You see a lot of the buzz in the news right now where somebody goes, oh, we're going to, AI music and everything else. It's like, no, like we want to automate the things people don't want to do. So I can go sit on a beach and play music instead of, doing some middle drawing, takeoffs for 19 years or whatever it happens to be.
And, AI, it's a how, not a what. So we talk about it like, I want to do AI. Like, okay, but what do you want? What problem are you solving, right? And AI, honestly, is not always the answer. It's not always the best way to solve a problem. And so, it's a really important tool in a modern software engineering toolbox. but, you need to use it when it's right and when it's appropriate. And I think, obviously people want to use it because it's cool and fun, but there's a lot of problems you don't need it for either.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where the hype narrative comes up a little bit sometimes.
Absolutely.
Where we go. I think every technology company, regardless of what industry they're in the last 6 months has announced something with AI. And it's just like, well, does that really do anything for your customers? Or did you think that was important for raising your Series B round or something?
Well, right. And I mean, so ultimately a new product should address like either a customer need you haven't addressed in the past, or, we have plenty of products that we could just, replace the guts of with AI and improve them, right? Yeah. And in those cases, maybe you won't notice. And maybe that's good that you don't notice, right? Because it's working.
Yeah, sometimes that's okay if it's in the background. It's just amplifying the workflows that you have. But I think that leads into my next question, actually. Can you talk a little bit about the real risks that might come from introducing AI technology, and how the teams that are developing the tools are really making sure that they're protecting our friends working in AEC?
First of all, data, right? So like you said, garbage in, garbage out, making sure that you have the right data to train the right use cases. So important. There are a lot of things we're learning about different kinds of data, right? We don't have all the answers. Sometimes processing data one way will lead to better results. Sometimes, there's a lot of science and experimentation going on, which is a lot of what my team does. But again, it's looking at what's the right tool for the job. There's always going to be danger in construction work. What we're aiming for is to make it safer and using AI in ways that will make it safer. So like augmentation, maybe like seeing things or patterns or trends that people are not seeing. Like, what are the strengths of using AI for something and then, using it correctly? And I think not taking the human out of the loop is really important for things that are dangerous. And we're also working on my team to do a lot of AI alignment, which is where we look at the output of the algorithms and we then kind of train secondary algorithms or use reinforcement learning to align them to what is either safer or people like better, right? So that also is a really important tool for what we're doing.
In the safety conversations, one that I really like using as an example, actually, because you think about it from, a large project, $200 million construction project. You've got your safety professionals on site. They do their site walks. They're looking for risks. They're analyzing all these things. Technology can analyze these risks at a scale that a person can't do.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing different types of scanning, photography, the technology can look for fall hazards or scaffolding issues. That's not to say that your super shouldn't go out and do these site walks or anything, because that human element is so important. But what it means is you're just getting so much more opportunity to check and see if everything is safe. And at a level that just a human just can't do.
Right.
It's just not possible.
It's processing more information for you.
Yeah.
Right? So it's augmenting.
Yep.
You.
And anybody on a construction site knows first thing you think about and the last thing you think about is going to be safety. So,
absolutely,
anything we can do to improve that is going to be great. Is there anything else that we can do to reduce some of these, common concerns that folks have or fears about these tools? Anything else that comes to mind?
A lot of what I do is just education, right? Explaining.
That's why we're here today.
Right. Explaining to people that it's just math. It's not scary. Explaining to people that it's really the data that gives a company a competitive advantage in AI, right? So like Google and Bing, if you look at both search engines, Bing probably has a better algorithm, to be honest, but Google has a lot more data, right? Yeah. And so the data really is that competitive advantage. And I think, educating people how it works, demystifying it is really important. But just, transparency, making sure people feel that their privacy is being protected, or just when they're interacting with a tool, being transparent that, hey, this is AI, right? Or this recommendation was generated by a computer, and giving them choices, right? So here are a bunch of recommendations. You can take them or not take them. And that's totally cool. And that's totally different than having it generate one answer and forcing them to use it, right?
This is it.
Yeah.
We've seen when it makes mistakes, and when it does, you kind of back away and you go, no, thank you.
So a lot of it is like, how do we interact with it in a design workflow, especially even if you have another person generating something for you behind the scenes, you probably don't want it or don't love it as much as your own, right? Yeah. And so, it is about that choice, and using the AI like a collaborator, I think will go a long way towards building trust.
I appreciate that. And that continued education, the conversation around it, especially as it becomes more and more buzzy, I think is incredibly important. It's unfortunate almost that we've had all these Terminator movies and everything, and somebody goes, artificial intelligence, they're coming. Like, I wish I could have Arnold pop out right now or something and join our conversation to help dissuade some of the myths around it. But sadly, I called them a couple times and he wasn't available, so we'll just have to roll solo. But I've got a couple more questions for you today. One more on AI. Can you tell me a little bit more about the aspects of artificial intelligence that people are not talking about, and and what else should they be talking about? Like, where are those gaps in the narrative right now that you're seeing?
Sort of the no tech is neutral situation, right? Like, again, this is the next step of software engineering. We've been using software for a long time, right? And so thinking of AI as something totally different than just using software, I mean, it's harmful, but also a little naive. And, just really, people don't think enough about the data. They don't think enough about, they're like, I want to do AI. Well, like, first you have to put your data in the cloud, and that's probably boring and hard. Then you have to organize it in certain ways, which again is like, feels very remedial to people who want this big fireworks moment, right?
They want it now.
They want it now. And and a lot of AI is built on like smaller AI. A lot of times the first things you're going to see out of using AI are, kind of boring. There's a patient aspect to it. There's the interface aspect, right? We're in control of how people interact with our AI, making sure that the customers know that they're in control of their workflow, that we're trying to help them. We're not trying to replace them, right? I think all of those things are just super, super important. And there's no secret math, right? My team and I, we publish a lot of papers, and it's because the AI research community is super open. No one company has like some secret box of technology, that
hidden tool that we're all going to sneak in.
No one does. It is a very open conversation in the scientific community. I wish more people would learn about it so they're not afraid. But yeah, it's very open. It's math, honestly. Like, are you afraid of math?
Kind of. There's a reason why I didn't go. Well, I abandoned engineering school. Just leave it at that.
All right.
Well, I appreciate that level set. And I think the point that you made about just the importance of, just cleaning house with your data is huge.
Yeah.
We did a research report with FMI a couple of years ago. It was called Harnessing the Data Advantage in Construction. And we really just leaned in on what folks were doing, where were they concerned, where the success factors were. And we found that a lot of people sit in a state of decision paralysis right now because they don't know where to start, because it is overwhelming. I have so much empathy for an organization, especially a large one, that hasn't standardized fully in a certain way in how they capture data. Or had the opportunity to think about what they want to do with their data, which is, I think, the important part about where you start. You got to go, what do you want to achieve? You don't just start gathering data madly.
Exactly.
And when you think about that, then you get to start identifying those little areas where you go, okay, where is our tech stack set up so well that making improvements on our data is going to have an impact without as much of a burden? You fix that, and then you've got a win. You get to show this to your team and you go, look at this, and now this cloud-based tool can figure this out. What if we did this everywhere else? And then you slowly start building. If you try to boil the ocean with your entire data strategy and you've got none to start with, it's a losing proposition because you're just going to be so overwhelmed. You got to pick that focus area.
Again, that sort of paradigm of like analyze, automate, and then augment, right? Like those go in an order, and they're, progressively more more magnitude of things you can do with that data as you get it into shape for use.
So I think we've covered the gamut as far as high level on what the heck AI is and why, people shouldn't be afraid of hanging out and, installing some tool, whether it's ChatGPT or something. There's a myriad of things you can jump into. And of course, Autodesk has announced some new stuff, and we've been doing a lot of cool stuff with regards to data as well. So don't forget about that. But moving on to our final question, What is one tool that you will always use on any project that you work on?
Creative problem solving.
I like it.
The number one thing I look for when I hire people. My undergrad degree is in music. My grad degrees are in linguistics. And I'm here talking to you about construction. So
but it makes sense when we talk through it. Your background is so impressive. So I'm really glad that we're here.
Yeah. Being able to take something from somewhere and apply it to a new place. AI is inherently interdisciplinary, and it's, the thing I use every single day.
I like it. And I think the creative focus that folks can bring to the table really helps us think about like what can we do? What's possible? What's the options? And then, we start trying things out and see where we're at. And, in a few years, hopefully the level of automation as we move further and further into the cloud is going to continue to increase. And I think that's applicable to, no matter what industry you're working in, whether it's construction or, any of the other industries that Autodesk serves or otherwise. So
absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today on Digital Builder. For everybody who is sitting and staring at me right now and listening to the show, of course, I am your host, Eric Thomas. We are a weekly podcast, a video-first podcast, as you might notice with all of these cameras pointing directly at me right now. If you are interested in checking out another episode, make sure you head over to the Autodesk Construction Cloud Digital Builder blog, or you can find me on LinkedIn at builder_digital. And if you also have a moment and you like what we're up to, I'd appreciate it if you take a second to, rate us 5 stars on whatever player that you listen to. And without further ado, goodbye.